Okay, very good. Welcome. I am calling the meeting to order at 6:12 p.m. Jessica, please perform the roll call.
Okay. Joe Pictionary.
Present.
Mary Lind.
Here.
Michael Bean.
Here.
Isa Aviad.
Present.
Jack Martin.
Here.
Terry Dillon.
I'm here.
Johnny Kirschman. That's for the App Store. And he is with technical difficulties. We're going to get him on. Jen McCauley. And Eric Adams.
Here.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. So I'm going to give it back to you, Isa. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so next on the agenda, something we've added this year is business from the audience. I'm going to read this statement for all who would wish to speak. Public testimony will be received.
Just one moment, Isa. I apologize. I think that we have number 3 is actually the minute approval, if I may.
Oh yeah, it's not in that order. Okay.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from our last meeting of October 1st, 2020.
Excuse me.
I'll second that.
A third.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay,
Aye.
minutes passed. I apologize for that blooper there. All right. Moving on to business from the audience. Thank you for your patience. Public testimony will be received during this section of business from the audience. As a reminder, the meeting is being recorded. The committee will listen to your comments but will not respond to public comment until the committee response portion of the meeting agenda. Meeting minutes will be taken by staff and forwarded to the city manager and city council. Members of the public can always send written testimony to the committee or city council. This is not your only option. As we begin our meeting tonight, I would like to ask members of the audience to please keep yourselves on mute until you are called to provide public testimony. Public testimony will allow speakers 2 minutes each for a total of 20 minutes for this portion of the meeting. If you are joining us online with a tablet, smartphone, or computer and wish to speak either of those times, please use the question window you'll see up in the right-hand corner for public testimony. Excuse me. So identify your name, please. This is the information we'd like, is for you to give us your name, your address, or alternately your Springfield ward number and the subject you would like to speak about. You will be called on when it is your turn to speak, so please wait for us to initiate that. For people calling in by phone only, you are in listen mode only and cannot be called upon. Okay, Jessica.
Okay, great.
Do we have anybody who's wishing to speak?
Actually, I just have a little bit of information to share. In just a moment, we're going to prep and have a timer on the screen to make sure that individuals are aware of time that it's elapsed during their time to speak. I'll make sure to inform the chair of the next speaker. And please keep in mind that there will be potentially some technical transition in between speakers, and we appreciate your patience in that regard. We'll do your best to get to as many people as possible. And when it is your turn to speak, please make sure to remember to unmute your mic. Once you start speaking, the 2-minute timer will begin. And if you're going to go over at time once it's elapsed, I'll just give you a polite reminder that your time has expired. And I am just going to go through the questions now and see who is interested in speaking. So just give me one moment. right. Our first speaker is going to be Shay Gallagher Starr. And Shay, I am going to unmute I have unmuted your mic. And until we have the ability to have the timer on the screen, I'm just going to do that 2-minute timer, and I'll let you know when that time is elapsed.
Great. Thanks so much, Jessica. Am I audible at this point?
Yes, you are.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me at this point?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yes, this is Shay Gallagher Starr, and I am in Ward 6. Thank you so much for the time this evening. Based on monies already lost to lawsuits in the past several years, I think we can see that the current protocols and culture of the Springfield Police Department aren't working particularly well for the city of Springfield. Inequitable policing is leading to violence as well as huge expenses for our city. It's also damaged the relationship between the police department and the community, as has been clearly demonstrated by public comments made during previous meetings of this committee. As the committee responsible for making long-range planning recommendations, I advocate that your recommendations address strategies to reduce inequity and violence. I ask that you recommend the city immediately adopt the harm reduction strategies as outlined in the 8 Can't Wait initiative already under discussion by the Springfield City Council. Recommend the police department adopt the reform recommendations from the Kenny settlement earlier this year. Recommend long-term strategic planning to shift the culture of the Springfield Police Department toward increased de-escalation and more equitable interactions with all of the residents of Springfield. I advocate for having these recommendations informed by the comprehensive community safety and abolition sections of the 8 Can't Wait initiative. I ask that you make recommendations that will reduce harm, reduce expenses in both insurance costs and lawsuits, and reduce the chances of Springfield ending up on the national news for all the wrong reasons. Thank you so much for your time.
Shay, thank you so much for your comments tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Shay. And our next speaker, that was just perfect at 2 minutes. And I just pushed pause until we can get a timer on the screen. But in the meantime, Thomas Kephart is next to speak. And Thomas, I have unmuted your mic. You can unmute yours now.
Okay, hi, thank you. I'm Thomas Kephart, Ward 6. You can all hear me, I'm assuming?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Actually, my questions are for Chief Lewis mostly. I attended the City Council meeting on Monday, and I heard some things that I found very, very concerning regarding Springfield Police Department's use of force during this work session. For example, he described the use of force policy anecdotally as a situational response by officers. He remarked that part of officer training was to assess the potential threat based on officer's own size versus that of a suspect, providing a scenario where an officer of small stature might encounter a person of larger stature, and that this could determine the amount of force necessary in a situation. And so I would like for him to clarify this policy, because my concern is that an officer's implicit bias might actually cause him or her to make snap decisions leading to excessive use of force. For example, studies consistently show that juvenile black males are commonly perceived as older and larger than they really are. If an officer is assessing a situation based on size of a person, they might actually make a call to use excessive force based on their implicit bias. So I guess my first question is, what training are you providing your officers to make sure that implicit bias does not lead to unnecessary use of force? In addition, I am concerned about some of the comments Chief Lewis made about sympathetic firings in this meeting. These are also known as contagious shootings, or commonly called that by police, are a supposed phenomenon that seems to occur for some unknown yet excusable reason because it just happens in officer-involved shootings. The way this came across it seemed as if it was just some sort of gee golly unfortunate statistic. And I ask, isn't this why we fund the police, to give them the tools to have more discipline in the use of force? What are we doing to train officers so that necessary force is applied in these types of situations? I actually found many of the comments regarding use of force to be very upsetting during this meeting, and I don't really even remember much of any discussion around the Springfield Police Department's policy regarding de-escalation or even the use of cartoid restraint. And so I'd like to hear more about all of these things tonight, if possible. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Thomas. Our next speaker is Elizabeth Utterback. And Elizabeth, I have opened your mic.
All right, thank you, Jessica. My name is Lizzie Utterback. I live in Ward 3. I have observed the SPAC meetings for several months now, and I'm concerned that the committee's charge of long-range planning is not being taken seriously. I want Springfield to be a place where Black people, Latinx people, Indigenous people, all people of color, LGBTQIA people, disabled people, poor people, and all other folks who are historically over-policed, most often the victims of police brutality, can feel welcome to live and visit. I want Springfield to be a community where folks can thrive. Last month, you all talked about organizing a public forum between the community and SPD, but that's not what the community has been asking for. We've been asking for you to demonstrate accountability and oversight of the police department. I emailed you all after last month's meeting with links to videos of various incidents that were allowed to be committed with impunity in front of SPD. The video of the accordion man being assaulted, people being stabbed by the man with a large flagpole, people being maced with bear and wasp spray. I didn't receive a response from a single one of you. Taking your role on this committee seriously includes responding to citizen emails and comments. You can also demonstrate this through your discussions that occur in these public meetings. I would expect to hear discussion of things such as the statewide police reforms that were signed into law in June 2020, the policing changes that were mandated in the Kinney settlement, the police liability insurance that has a per claim deductible of $250,000, and other policies and procedures that would avoid these costly lawsuits, which may very well bankrupt our city on top of the $23 million yearly police budget. But it's not just about lawsuits. It's about creating a community in which we feel safe and prioritizing a guardianship model over an outdated warrior model of policing. And to do so, we need a commitment from you. Please have these conversations and find the courage to ask the hard questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Marianne Sinhaus. And Marianne, I have just unmuted your mic.
Hello, I'm a former Springfield resident and I still work and shop in Springfield. I am very invested in the city and I want it to thrive. I think that the community should have a say in how they're being policed. And I want to know how that's going to happen because I can hear the community asking for change and I can also see that the response to this request is resistance to change, especially listening to Chief Lewis give reasons for why SPD cannot immediately and wholeheartedly adopt all of the 8 can't wait recommendations. Drug enforcement crackdowns, increase in gun searches and seizures, zero tolerance policing, the maintenance of law and order. These are all wonderful catchphrases, but that caused the murder of Eric Garner, suffocated on a New York sidewalk. Breonna Taylor was caught up in a drug enforcement crackdown. She was killed in her own home. Black neighborhoods all around the country are subjected to more police presence. And I just want to know how SPD is going to respond to this in a way that is sensitive to the community's needs. I yield my time.
Thank you so much, Marianne.
Thank you, Marianne. The next speaker is Thomas Lawrence, and I am going to just take one moment. And Thomas, I've unmuted your mic.
Great, thank you. Thomas Lawrence, Ward 1. I also wanted to talk about the Monday meeting, which I attended and listened to the whole work session and all of that, and the use of force part and how an officer gets to assess a threatful or dangerous situation. If we're going to talk about the size of the cop versus the person that they're questioning, I mean, that sounds like optics. And if we want to talk about all the optics of a scary situation, then let's cover all of it. There are a lot of people out there open carrying right now, cans of bear mace, shields, guns, etc. Isn't every single one of them someone that we should be perceiving as a threat to excessively use force then? That is just a ridiculous way to assess what level of force police officers are allowed to use. I am far more afraid of a bunch of people walking around open carrying than I am a person who's bigger than me. So why are those people and those crowds continually walking around unchecked or assisted by police as they're patrolling through the town? How many times have they had officer escorts down Main Street, even though Chief Lewis has made it very clear that Main Street is dangerous and Black Lives Matter protesters are absolutely not allowed to be on Main Street? Why is that crowd continually allowed to do it when they are clearly the most threatening looking force, threatening looking people out there in this town right now? I understand that guns should not be considered a weapon that is just automatically going to be used, etc. I am not against guns. I am not anti-gun or anti-open carry. But if we're going to use optics to decide whether or not an officer is allowed to use force, then I'd say that's a pretty fair one to be judging, and it's clearly not. Finally, the barricade on Thurston that night. There was a barricade up, police on one side, Black Lives Matter protesters on the other. How are police the ones who broke through the barricade considered an acceptable use of force? I would love an explanation. I asked that on Monday as well, and I would love to hear an answer because I don't see how that is a justifiable use of force when there's a barricade up. That's the whole point of the barricade. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas, for being here tonight.
And I just had one final person that I was waiting for a clarification on. Angela Sullivan, if you would see that question that I responded to with requesting just clarification if you wanted to provide public testimony, that'd be great. Okay, excellent. Yes, she does. So our next speaker is Angela Sullivan, and I am just going to take a moment and unmute her mic. And Angela, you're unmuted, and you can unmute your mic on your end now.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Angela Sullivan, and I'm from Ward 4. And my question surrounds this. Many of us have seen a few scenes caught on camera involving a suspect under arrest by force, writhing in pain, which is evidently treated as resisting arrest. What does the Springfield Chief Richard Lewis, want to say to officers to avoid this scenario? Thank you for my time.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you.
Okay, so I understand, Jessica, we have no more people waiting to give comment?
Yeah, I had one last comment come in while Angela was speaking, and they provided a question but not indicating that they wanted to speak. It was Emily Damon. If you'd like to speak, this is your moment. We still have time. And so she just had a question that I'll forward on after, and that is the end of the list of individuals who've requested to provide public testimony this evening.
Well, thank you again to each and every person who was present tonight to give your testimony. We value your feedback to the department, and we will be discussing these issues among ourselves. made tonight. Am I muted? Jessica, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, Anissa.
Okay, it seemed to go away for a moment. So, all right, so it's not, so you all heard me just fine. It's time for committee comments. Very good. Who would like to start?
Michael, it looks like you're speaking as well.
Okay, great. Now I'm unmuted. I was muted by the organizer.
Oh, there you go.
Took all control away. All right.
Do you have some comments to make, Michael?
Yeah, you were asking if we could hear you, and I was telling you we couldn't, but I was also muted,
Well,
trying to respond to your question.
any responses to the people who have shared their opinions tonight?
I have one. Elizabeth talked about long-range planning, and I kind of agree with her in spirit. And so I think I would propose some kind of work session so that we understand where our parameters on this committee are, and then what we turn over to Joe and the city council, so that we all have an understanding, we can all start working towards that. I am one of those people who's gotten a lot of emails, and I am unsure what I should and shouldn't respond to. I'm happy to respond to all of them, but if everyone's responding to every email. So I would like to propose a work session where we figure and review. I reviewed the bylaws, but I was also sort of told that those were going to change. So do you know anything about that, Joe?
Well, they're all getting reviewed for all the committees. We did actually go through several of them and recognize that when I spoke with the assistant city manager and the city manager, that this has been way overdue in regards to since this was put together. You know, since this committee has been put together, it's morphed into something really kind of completely different. The members of this committee were basically folks that the city wanted to hear from in regards to what is going on in the city, what's happening, where services need to be directed, more of a communication center for the PD to be used to be more efficient. It was never that my understanding was that it was not something where the committee itself would be acting as oversight, but more as an information base and a resource for the police department in regards to how it's being run. For example, the chief would put together something and say, hey, we're thinking about, you know, having our shirts having exterior exoskeleton type bullet resistant vests as opposed to under the shirt vests, and that type of thing was brought to the committee and talked about those type of things, but generally not operational issues, but
well,
more.
I can see where there's some confusion, because if our audience is reading the current set of bylaws, it's completely out of there. So I'm not sure if they need to be rewritten or revised. I would make that a high priority, but I think we should have a work session, come to an agreement among ourselves, what our purpose is, what we should focus on, and then get that out and do it, because I'm feeling conflicted.
Well, since I joined the committee years ago, Joe, it's exactly what you described. That has been what we have done at every meeting.
Right, and I think that the council needs to, and I can ensure that bumps us up in a priority in regards to the direction of this committee and its duties, because it doesn't go the other way around. It doesn't come from here and say, hey, council, this is what we're going to do. It's,
Well,
you know,
so
so
you are the acting mayor, but we should address it in a work session, and the way it was laid out, at least in the bylaws, and what we're hearing from the community and what the needs are. I'm not sure that we just want to turn it over to someone that makes it a community neighborhood watch reporting committee, or if it is, we should just be real clear about that. So yeah, so I would like to get other people's input and views.
I would
Hey, Michael,
also agree. I'm sorry. I just
Michael,
love
go ahead, Barry.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
I'm with Michael. I haven't been on a great long time. And I guess I've always kind of struggled with exactly what our role is. And I think it's because potentially things have changed. And I would appreciate just a clearer understanding of what our role and purpose is so that I know how I can best serve. Thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted.
So I think something that might help with that, and you guys can let me know if this works now. We could have a work session, as Michael talked about, and have Mary Bridget, the city attorney, come and kind of assist with some of those kind of questions and what the role is. And then Councilor Pictionary, obviously be the representative of council, can indicate the desire of council for the committee. And I think that may help clarify some of that. We send everybody else the bylaws out again and kind of take a look at that. So if that's beneficial, then we can schedule that in the future.
Yeah, let's do that, because from day one when I joined, it was you were bringing to us things that were happening within the department, and you were getting our feedback on those policies and procedures that were in place or proposed, and that's pretty much what we did.
Yeah, and then the original, going back a lot of years, one of the original functions of it was to put that long-range planning together. Okay. That's where you see some of the documents that we've had for years here were originally from the Police Planning Task Force, which is what we used to be called prior to being called SPAC now. So those were two of the big charges of the community or the committee at that time.
And I think in the background, it's being worked on in the background, and clarification of what's in the bylaws and in the charter. And so that I think can work concurrently, not necessarily one have to precede the other, but I think that it's going to be important that they work concurrently. So that way everyone is on the same sheet of music and everybody concurs with what kind of work product that is expected out of this group.
Is that the city attorney working on that, or is the council members form a committee to work on it, or do they want our input? Or
it's the city manager's office along with the city attorney is going to have to review that, and then that's usually presented to the council and the council for approval.
So the city manager is working on the revision of our bylaws.
Well, I didn't say the revision, but just a look at to see where those things, I guess it's a matter of semantics, but it's being looked at and it's being recognized that things need to be clarified for sure.
Right. I would encourage we expedite it. So
yeah.
Who's doing that? Okay.
Yeah, because the public needs to know too, and it's important because we have folks that are talking in the evenings here in these meetings that are replicate of the same type of conversations and comments during city council meetings. And it's like, okay, as a citizen, I'm saying the same thing to what appears to be the same group. And so how can I don't feel like I'm, why do I have to do that, say it twice, for example? And I can see how it also perpetuates a feeling of not being heard. So yeah, it's not falling on deaf ears for sure. And there's definitely some changes, but it's not easy to make overnight changes. And I know it sounds ridiculous to say that, but it's true. It takes time to get some of these things through.
Okay, so we can have a work session.
Also, we did not attend or know about Monday's gathering, whatever that happened. And just an update on that would be helpful to me. because it was referred to a couple of times by
That was
some
the city
callers.
council meeting?
They're referring to the city council meeting, I believe.
Okay. Okay. And but there was obviously some talk that that spurred their conversation tonight.
Right, and I think the chief is actually going to cover that tonight.
Yeah, he's next.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are we ready to move on to that?
Well, those were my comments on the comments from the comments.
Absolutely, it was nice commenting. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is business from the chief. Chief Lewis, take it away.
So I did talk about this. So Barry, we call it the 8 Can't Wait comparison, campaign comparison. I did talk about this at council, and I apologize to Councilor Pictionary, and I'll try to, it's going to be a similar presentation. I'll try to shorten it a little bit since it took me all of an hour and we still didn't get through all of it Monday night. And so we're down a little bit on time right now. So I'm going to go through this.
Don't abbreviate anything on my behalf for sure, because I think the most important thing is especially in that work session that we had with yours, and that's why I asked you to do that in a work session setting instead of just issuing a memo. So that way it's a great opportunity as an education piece for everybody that's present, including listeners. So don't abbreviate anything. There's a lot of information that I do know from history, from my own education and training, but it's super important that everybody here is able to ask the questions they want to get out. So otherwise, because the people listening can also hear those questions and perhaps feed that information to them that's going to be helpful. So just take what time you need as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, and so when I go through here, if you'd just raise your hand if you have a question in the middle of this, that's totally fine. When we go through the specific 8 issues, I'll make sure I stop at the end of each one and just kind of look and see if anybody, you may have to wave your hand quite a bit for me to see everybody. And Issa, if it's okay with you, if I just call on people, or would you rather call on them and you can see them waving?
No, how about it?
Okay, all right. So what this is 8 Can't Wait is a national campaign asking police agencies to do change their use of force policy and some of their practices to meet this national campaign. And I won't go into great detail about the campaign itself, but it gives another number of things, and we'll go through each and every one of those, and I will explain how the Springfield Police Department's policy either meets that or basically meets most of it, but not all of it. And then that way you guys can ask questions based on that. But just to give you some preliminary information ahead of time is, so, you know, where do our officers receive training for use of force stuff? And there were some questions about this, and I'll try to hit some of the specific questions we heard tonight from the audience. I don't promise I'm going to cover every one of them because I may not remember all of them as I'm going through this. But when I made that presentation to council, I never intended it to be that I'm going to talk about every type of use of force that an officer be involved in. There's a myriad of stuff that can come up, and I was just trying to hit the highlights or just simply provide an example of what I was talking about. So an officer receives training basically at the initial hire. It's better than about, I think it's roughly about 24 hours just that first week that we hire them. Before they really do anything else, they're given a bunch of training on different aspects of use of force. Then they receive additional training when they go to the police academy. They receive a lot of training up there. They do scenario-based training, classroom training, and the legal aspects of it, the liability aspects of it, the actual hands-on participation in it. And again, most of the stuff at the academy, or a lot of it, is scenario-based, so the officers recruits get a chance to do real live situations, and that's where your most advantageous training comes from. Once they get back to the academy, they're with a field training officer. I think I've talked about this with you guys a lot for 17 weeks, and they're taught use of force in situations and during their training process through there. The department has ongoing training, whether it's put on within the agency, we have outside trainers come in, or we send officers to outside training to attend, depending on where it is in the state or maybe even outside the state. DPSST has a requirement that each officer, to keep their certification, will receive 8 hours of some type of use of force training every year. That's the minimum requirement. And we obviously meet that, and I think we try to go beyond that. And then they'll get training from court decisions. Different court decisions will come down. The district attorney's office will share if those change the laws or legalities, what police officers can and can't do. So that's another area. So what is police use of force? And I'm just going to read this. There's a lot of different definitions. This one probably is the closest to what we believe here. It's police use of force is the means of compelling compliance or overcoming resistance to an officer's command in order to protect life or property or to take a person into custody. And so what can force be? It can be verbal. You know, if I give someone a command to stop, that's basically a form of force. It's physical force. Physical force can be simple, an escort hold, an arm bar, or actually a physical confrontation where you're actually wrestling or something to that effect with somebody. It can be chemical, which is like an OC or pepper spray. It can be impact weapons. An impact weapon is like a beanbag. These are what we call less lethal weapons. These are a chance for us to use something on an individual so we don't have to resort to using our handgun in a particular situation. It can be electronic, which is obviously the taser. This particular tool has saved a lot of use of force from our officers having to go hands-on with somebody. The taser has, it's not foolproof. I want to tell people it doesn't work all the time. It doesn't even work probably 75% of the time, but it's still a tool to use that helps us out. And then there's obviously the firearm is the last resort there. So why do officers use force? And that's to establish control of a situation, to effect an arrest, to prevent someone from escaping, or protect yourself or others. So those are the kind of the areas that a police officer would typically use force. And then I don't know if I've talked with this group about kind of how is a use of force judged by the courts or the juries that decide if some situation there was excessive force use. And there was a decision about 30 years ago called Graham v. Connor. And that particular situation, you're going to hear the word objective reasonableness or the objectively reasonable standard. You'll hear some similar combination of that. And basically what that says is the court says that an officer is judged on the information they knew at that time, not in the bright light of hindsight, not after, you know, everybody realized you have to go through all the facts and everything. It's what that officer knew and what made him make that particular decision at that point in time right there. And is it a reasonable decision? Would an officer with like training, like experience, make that same situation as that officer did there? So, you know, it's just the court's trying to come down, and actually I think they did a really good job in this particular case, is what is a common sense decision? You know, and I give the example of you have an officer who shoots somebody who's got a weapon in their hand, a gun in their hand, but the gun later turns out to be just simply a replica. And you can't go back in the bright light of hindsight and say, well, the officer shouldn't have shot him because this guy was not a deadly threat to the officer with this type of weapon. Obviously, that's not true because the officer did not know that at the time. It would be different, that same scenario, if the officer truly knew that the object in the individual's hand was not an actual firearm. Then objectively, it would not be reasonable for him to use his weapon at that. So the standard looks at a lot of things, and I'll kind of cruise through this real quickly. The severity of the crime. Does the suspect pose a specific threat to either the officer or other people? Is the subject resisting arrest or attempting to flee? The availability of other options. Are there other options that a reasonable officer would use in that particular situation? Would they make the same decision that I made right then and there? And there was a question that came up in the comments here, and hopefully I can do this justice, about we talk about an officer's size and experience, or size being different. And maybe I didn't do a super job of explaining that. But again, if you have an officer, and let's just pretend the officer's by themselves in a situation, and I'm an officer that I'm only 5'5" and I weigh 130 pounds, and I've come across a individual that is, you know, 5'10" and 180 pounds and 190 pounds, and I try to take them into custody, or I'm going to take them into custody, and they put their hands up and they decide that they're going to take a boxing stance or something like that. So what level of force am I allowed to use? And you can't have the same force for every single officer. An officer with that size different is probably not going to win that particular fight if it comes down to a boxing match or a wrestling match or something like that. That officer in that particular case may be justified in using a taser. You could have the exact same scenario with an officer who is 6'4", 245 pounds, and they may not have the same issue. They may be required to go ahead and take some kind of physical action and without the use of the taser. Does that make sense? It really depends on the officer. Could be the officer's age. Michael?
Do the officers get tased? Is that part of their training?
Yes. They do know what the taser feels like. Yes. And so that's kind of it in a nutshell, real quick, just kind of talk about use of force. And so I'll jump right into the 8 can't wait stuff if we're ready for that. And the first one there is the ban on chokeholds and strangleholds. So the 8 can't wait campaign has an outright ban on that. And that's also part of House Bill 4203, and then I think there's 4301 added to that passed this summer. And so when those House bills passed, it said you can no longer use a carotid hold, carotid vascular neck restraint is what we call it officially. You can no longer use that hold unless you would be justified in using deadly physical force. So to give you a little bit of just a quick scenario, I might be wrestling with somebody, I'm on the ground wrestling with them, and all of a sudden the individual produces a knife or a gun, and I can't get to my weapon, so I put him in this neck restraint hold, and it would be justified in that particular situation. But just to use it as a routine way because I'm fighting with someone, just a physical altercation, you can no longer use that. And our officers were immediately told when this law passed, this House bill passed, and was signed by the governor, that went into effect. Our policy will reflect that, verbatim of what the state standard is now. And so the only thing that I say we match this practice. The only difference is the 8 Can't Wait campaign has an outright ban on it, and even the state law does not have an outright ban on it if deadly force is allowed. Anybody have questions on this one? Okay, seeing none. Require de-escalation during incidents and detainment. So de-escalation is, there's a specific definition, and I'll just read that to you. It says, de-escalation is taking action or communicating verbally or non-verbally during a potential force encounter in an attempt to stabilize the situation, reduce the immediacy of the threat so that more time, options, resources can be called upon to resolve the situation without the use of force or without a reduction in the force necessary. And so let me talk about how we incorporate this into our policy. One, there was some litigation that requires us to put in there. It's also mentioned in one of the House bills. I think it's 4301, if I remember right. And that de-escalation has been part of the training and practice of Springfield PD for years. If you go back all the way to when I was hired, which was in the early 80s, we practice these same techniques. De-escalation is nothing new. It's just been labeled differently. We call it calming the situation down or buying time. And that's really what it boils down to. So while we haven't specifically had it in policy, we will be having it specifically in policy. It will be part of our use of force policy going forward. I think our officers are very good at this. There's a lot of situations where we do de-escalate incidents. And I can just think of just in the last month, 4 very serious cases where individuals were armed with either knives, one in particular was a machete, one was a weapon, had guns in their hand. And what we don't do as an agency, and I was going to talk about this a little bit later, but I think I'll just talk about it right now, is we don't do a very good job of keeping track of those times that we did do this so that we can tell the public, look, these are some serious situations our officers involved in. This is the way we were able to resolve it. Whether we simply talk the individual totally out of it or we use some lesser form of force, maybe it was a beanbag gun or something like that. So we didn't have to resort to a handgun or a rifle in a situation like that. And, because that's really our ultimate goal, is to resolve these situations without harm to anybody. And I give an example of our SWAT team. Has been around for a long time. I mean, I've been here almost 37 years, and if I remember right, our SWAT team's only been involved in one shooting in that entire 37 years. And so we're very careful of how we try to resolve situations, the use of negotiators and that sort of thing. So the requirement of this 8 Can't Wait campaign require de-escalation during incidents and containment. Yes, we're definitely going to do that. And we'll do that as part of our ongoing practice and policy. Require warning before officers shoot their firearms. This is also, again, mentioned in House Bill 4301 that says you have to give a verbal warning before you take some kind of action and guard before you fire your weapon or something. But there is also a caveat in there that says that if the circumstances don't allow, then you don't have to give that verbal warning. So people ask, well, when would that be that you wouldn't give a verbal warning? If you think about if you had an active shooter in a mall where someone is actually shooting people as you're coming in there, if you take the time or wait for time to either give that warning or anything else, additional people could be killed in that situation. And so our policy and practice is, yes, we're going to give our practice and our training is give a verbal warning before you actually use any type of force. But if the circumstances don't allow it, it's not mandated. So you may have any questions about that. Yep. Require officers to exhaust all alternatives before shooting. And again, that's kind of the similar thing that I just talked about, I guess, a little bit. You don't have to go through specific steps. If I come across a situation, I don't have to try a taser before I go to a handgun if that's a situation warrants it. You have to use the proper force to respond to that given situation. And so if you see someone in the process of committing a deadly attack on someone, you need to respond immediately with the proper force. And so I think the policy and practice of this, our policy and practices were aligned with the ORS, which is 161-239 in this particular thing. And we just don't want to put our officers or the public in an unreasonable danger by making them exhaust all of other alternatives before they actually would have to resort to a weapon. And this one's a little bit hard to explain without spending a lot of time on it, but I think the best way to do that is if I come upon a situation and someone's stabbing an individual, I'm not going to try the taser first and see if that works. There's no time for that. The taser, again, is only effective a certain percentage of the time, may not be effective at all in that situation. You're trying to save that third person's life. Any questions on that one? Okay. Require officers to intervene and stop or report excessive force used by other officers. So House Bill 4205 was passed this summer and specifically talks about the duty to intervene. We've incorporated that into our policy and our practice of Springfield PD. I guess I should say it's been our practice for a long time. We just never had it specifically spelled out in our policy manual. So that will be in there. It is there. It will follow the wording that's in House Bill 4205 specifically. Maybe I said 4203. If I got the number there, I apologize for what's wrong. But we'll make that part of our policy in our, I think it's 26.1.1, which is our code of conduct policy. So we will meet that standard requiring that. We always have had an expectation. If you see an officer, if one officer sees another officer, using excessive force, we expect him to stop that happening at the time and then also report that. All right. Ban on shooting at moving vehicles. So our training has been regarding this is we do not shoot at moving vehicles unless there's exigent circumstances. So when would there be a time that you would allow an officer to shoot at a moving vehicle? The time you would allow, and I'll give an example, an unfortunate situation that occurred here in Springfield. We had a mid-30s individual attack his parents, hurt the mother very bad with a baseball bat, killed the father, then got in their vehicle and drove it, purposely ran over an individual at the Value Village on West Centennial, and then continued on into Eugene, where he ran over 2 pedestrians, killing one of them in Eugene. And so in that particular situation, if an officer were to discharge his firearm trying to stop that person inside that vehicle, that would be a justifiable time to shoot at a moving vehicle. But the reality of it is, the reason why I think this is on here in this Say It Can't Wait campaign is they wanted to avoid where officers, and I'll try to give an example. I get a call of a suspicious vehicle. I drive in, the vehicle is actually parked maybe up against a building with its lights towards me as an officer, and I'm walking up on the vehicle and I'm walking directly in the path of the vehicle. And when the individual sees the police officer, they put their car in gear and they want to drive out of there. Now, are they purposely trying to run over the officer, or are they simply trying to escape? And so we teach our officers the practices: don't put yourself in front of a vehicle. Don't ever think that you're going to stop a vehicle. And you shouldn't even think, even if you shoot into the vehicle, even if you were to hit your target, doesn't mean the vehicle is going to stop. You're still in danger. You know, the officer's still in danger. Plus the idea of just shooting into any vehicle. If you think about when you're out walking around or driving around and you look into a vehicle, it's hard to see in a lot of vehicles, whether it's daylight because of the glare on the window from the sun, or it's nighttime and the windows are a little bit tinted, and you could have other innocent people inside that vehicle. So the idea of shooting into a moving vehicle or any vehicle like that is really something to be very careful about. And so we teach our officers, you know, you walk up on a traffic stop and you can see this guy in there and you can tell he's going to put this thing in gear and go. Do not get yourself in front of the vehicle. And don't, because that's what's happened, I think, across the country at times, and that's part of the reason they have this. So there's not for our policy, there's not an outright ban on shooting the moving vehicles, but it's got to be a pretty specific situation before you're allowed to do that. Any questions on that?
That makes sense.
Establish a force continuum that restricts and creates policy regarding the most severe type of force to the most extreme situations. So this one's a little bit hard to the use of force continuum was kind of the only way I can describe this. Council Petitioner, you might be able to describe it better than I can, but kind of a stair-step approach of how to use force. And maybe I come across a situation and this particular type of continuum says, well, first you do this, then if that doesn't work, you do this and that. And it doesn't create it creates probably a lag time that we don't want our officers to go through to experience. And this use of force continuum was something that was around for a long time. It started in the 80s, and it was taught through most police agencies. And then back, I'm not sure, probably mid 90s or so, it went away. And it went away from the force continuum. Department of Public Safety Standards and Training, which is the police academy, they do not teach us anymore. It's out of their repertoire of what they're teaching all of the officers throughout the state. And so in this particular SPD's policy and practice, we don't utilize the continuum, and so we don't meet this particular standard. So any questions on that? What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to stay with what the officers are going to be taught when they go to the police academy and what most everybody in the state is doing right now. They're not using this force continuum training. Okay. Hang on. Require comprehensive reporting by officers for every instance of force or threats of force utilized by law enforcement. So we do meet this standard. So when our officer utilizes force, that's more than just a simple escort hold or something like that. So it could be as I end up wrestling with someone all the way up to a firearm. They're expected to notify a supervisor. That supervisor will get involved at that point. The supervisor who approves the report will take a look at it and see if, based on the report, that the use of force looks appropriate. And every report then goes to our professional standards supervisor, who also will take a look at the report. And if there's any concerns, they can those will be forwarded to me, and then I would assign them out for further investigation at that point. I think the body-worn camera program, when that comes online, will make this much simpler, specifically for the professional standards sergeant. That way, he or she can simply look at every case that comes through and be able to sit there and take a look at the body camera. Now, again, the body camera is not foolproof. Sometimes in a use of force situation, if you think about this, if I'm wearing a camera right here and I'm wrestling with someone on the ground, you may not see much. It's not like there's someone filming this action because the camera's right there. So it's not going to answer every single question all the time, but it will give us a picture that we haven't seen before. So in this particular thing, I think we do meet this requirement. And I think that's the last one. Did I go through them that fast?
Hey, Chief?
Yeah. Yes.
Just a quick comment, and I wanted to add, if you recall, during that work session, that I felt it was important that when you have a use of force incident, that there's some things about it that deserve more attention, et cetera. But I think that it would play out well for the PD and perhaps the public to know that those reports get forwarded to the, for example, the defensive tactics team or the use of force instructors. So they put their eyes on that to see if there's opportunities to improve responses in the future, and perhaps train different responses that may be more effective and more safe for the officer and for the suspect or the person that's being handled. They may not even be a suspect. They may be a person that is out of control and have not committed any crime whatsoever. So that even increases the need to make sure that those incidences are reviewed by the professionals. And plus, also, it gives the opportunity to see, for the instructors to see that, are they training appropriately, and is there room for their own improvement? So I think that extra level of observation would be really what a time well spent and a good investment.
Yeah, and that's pretty easy for us to do. Sorry, hang on a second. My light likes to pop off there. That's pretty easy for us to do. We do keep a part of the reporting in our electronic reporting. When you do use of force, there's some check boxes the officers have to fill, and we can go back and look at those. And so if you remember, sometimes to this committee, I provided a pie chart that talks about the number of arrests and the type of force we used. And so we could go back and let's say you're the use of force instructor about taser. So I can go back and I can see that we actually used a taser 8 times in that particular year. And so if you want to pull those reports, you could pull those 8 reports and take a look at that and see how effective the taser was or how ineffective it might have been. And same thing with a lot of other aspects of this. Canines are on there. And so there is the reporting. And I agree with Councilor Piscineri that we need to utilize our experts to see kind of where our officers are using force, and if there's injuries either to the suspect or the officers, how can we avoid that in the future, or is there something else we can do differently next time? And so just to give you guys just a little bit of an idea of how often we use force for a year's time. In this last particular year, we had 4,133 arrests. We use some type of physical force, and again, that could be a simple arm bar, maybe a wrestling match, chasing a suspect, 229 times. So that comes out roughly just about 5.5% of the time if you're actually making a physical arrest, that there's some type of use of force. And again, some of it can be pretty minimal, some of it can be pretty significant. We have a taser use or a taser displayed, and what a taser displayed is I pull my taser out and I say, you need to stop what you're doing now or you're going to get tased, and the person complies. And so that's a positive thing. Obviously, the individual didn't want to get tased, and so they quit their behavior or their resistance. Same thing, firearm displayed. Anytime our officers pulled their weapon and pointed at someone, the expectation is that you mark that in your report. So there were 62 times an officer pulled their weapon and pointed at somebody. So you think, wow, does that sound like a lot to some people? It could be as simple as the end of a car pursuit, or you pulled over a stolen car. You're going to do what we call a felony car stop. It could be that situation. It could be you went to an armed subject call and you pulled your gun out in that situation. Our canines have
Chief,
yes.
Mike's wearing, yeah, there you go.
Can you tell me out of that 5%, how many are under the influence?
We don't have there's not a definitive box in the electronic reporting for that. We could go back there and with someone could actually look through there. But if you ask me to give you a guess, I'd say a substantial number of them were under the influence.
Anecdotal.
Yeah. And then our canines have actually bit 19 people. So that's like less than 1% of the time in an arrest situation that the dog will do that. And then we have less lethal. Again, less lethal could be like a beanbag weapon. We only use that 2 times in a particular year. And then you have what we call multiple types, and that could be you use 2 different types. It could be I used a taser, it was ineffective, then we went to maybe we had to get a big wrestling match with the individual or something like that. So the use of force is rare. It's something that we can keep track of. It's something we are required as part of particular the Kinney settlement to provide counsel with annual report on use of force with a little more detail than I'm talking about right here, and we'll definitely do that. I think it's, and well, part of that will be made public, attached to our website. And I think it'll be eye-opening for all people to take a look at that and realize that it doesn't happen very often. We want people to comply, and I always want people to remember is unfortunately, I think, to Michael's point, unfortunately, a lot of people will comply once they're told to, but then there's those individuals who are, under the influence who may not have the best judgment in the world sometimes, and or those people who are suffering from mental illness that it's difficult sometimes for them. And so we've got to work on how we take those individuals into custody with the least amount of force necessary. I would submit that our officers are really very good at de-escalation. I watch this, I see this quite a bit out on the street when I go out there and watch them talk to people. They get a lot of experience at this. We talk about there's 4,133 arrests. Well, there's a lot more times that officers are out there dealing with people in crisis situations that it doesn't end up in an arrest. And so they get a lot of experience dealing with people like this. I'm trying to think of maybe some of the questions that came up from the audience, if you don't mind, if I just kind of see if I can answer a couple of them. One individual had a question, and I think if I heard it right, he was concerned about the way I was talking about sympathetic fire and what that means to the group here is what that is. If myself and my partner go into a situation and there's a suspect and I shoot because I see the individual has a gun, and my partner, only reason my partner is shooting is because I'm shooting. And so that's what we call sympathetic reflex. And we teach, don't do that. And so how do we train, because you're going to have the assumption my partner must see something deadly. I can't see it, but it must be deadly. Well, I could be mistaken. I may not, maybe I think that the cell phone is a gun and I'm mistaken and now my partner is shooting. And so how do you train for that? So we do it up on the range. We've done this for a number of years on our SWAT team, and we do it with all our officers. Is you go into a situation and you practice 2 guys going into a room, and then we have targets in the room. And sometimes the targets, they're actually just targets, and it may show a picture of someone with a gun or someone with a cell phone or whatever they have in their hand, and the range masters change this all around. So sometimes when you go in this door, you shouldn't be shooting. There is no target to shoot. And so what we do to train against this sympathetic fire is, I know I'm going to go in there, I'm going to shoot at a target that is not justified in shooting at. And the idea is we don't want the next person to be shooting. So that's how we train officers. Don't fire a weapon just because your partner is. And I hope that answers the individual's question regarding that. It's not hard to train. Like I said, we've done it for a number of years. It's a concern of mine. I've seen this across the country before, and we want to make sure if you're going to fire your weapon, you've identified a threat yourself, and not just because someone else is firing their weapon. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Let me kind of look at my notes here. I didn't get them all down here. Does anybody else remember anything specific that I can ask about somebody commented on. So do you guys have any questions regarding use of force or what we should or shouldn't do?
Is the city attorney someone writing a new force of policy? I think you mentioned that last month.
Yeah, so, and part of that is from the Kinney settlement. So it's got to go back and forth between the lawyers and stuff like that. I should say I wrote most of it, and then the city attorney puts in the fine details, and make sure that by the time we meet next time, I will guarantee that will be done and get that to you. And I'll try to send you a version that shows the changes so you can realize what used to be there and what's currently there. And it's not just because of the Kinney settlement. There's all those House bills that came into effect this summer that are part of that will be incorporated into the policy there.
Chief, I have a comment for you regarding use of force. Would that be something we could talk about for this coming year? Can we have some kind of community meeting where PD puts on a demonstration whether it just be video or simulation of what that looks like from the officer's eyes, what that looks like from the public's eyes? Give some real examples so they could, we know that for people to learn things and take things in, if you can employ as many senses as possible, it's better. So if they could talk to PD, if they could watch a video, discuss what they're watching from your point of view, and could that help our community understand a little more about what this entails from the officer's point of view?
Yeah, I think that'd be great. There's a system called the Milo system, and I'm going to forget what it stands for, but it's basically you walk into almost a 3D type image. The state police has it, and it's kind of a traveling show that we can get as a police department. We've used it occasionally for having the public come in and try that. We've had some newscasters come in and try it, where they put themselves in the situation of shoot or don't shoot situation.
Right.
I think that's really valuable. And what you're saying is truly valuable too. It gives people a chance to see what's happening. A lot of times you'll see video of an officer firing their weapon and you think, why is he doing that? But then when you see maybe a different perspective of a different video, then you totally understand, okay, in that given situation, why did that happen? But I think that would be advantageous for the public. I don't know how effective it might be trying to do it through this type of medium. Gathering, in a classroom and then showing videos, it might be a little better. I mean, we can try it in this manner. I think we may be in this situation for a long time. We do try to do scenario-based training for our officers. That's a big deal, is actual hands-on, here's a real-life situation. I can stand up in front of talk in front of people all day long and say, you should do it this way and you shouldn't do it that way. But until you're out there trying and experiencing it, we all come from different backgrounds. When we come into law enforcement.
No, and that's what I actually meant is, meeting at Willamette Lane or something, do the distancing or whatever, but something where people can actually eye to eye, hear officers tell the stories, show videos that, true life maybe, where you can press the point. But it is so on the minds of Springfield citizens that I think it's not optional. I think we should try to find a way to reach out eye to eye, face to face, to let them really ask their questions and show them this is what an officer, we know from the committee, the training we've had in our lifetime regarding PD, and me having worked for 911, I've heard all kinds of things, but that they actually see what it's like for an officer to walk in and maybe they're holding a child hostage or, whatever it is.
And people need to realize that, sometimes we get this idea in the public that officers are these guys out here, shooting people all the time. And we only average about one officer involved shooting about every 18 months, roughly. I mean, that over the last, 30 years, that's kind of the average. It doesn't happen very often. The other thing people forget, it's very traumatic for a lot of officers. I'm not saying it's traumatic for every officer, but it's very traumatic for a lot of officers. And you look on a national average, they'll say, I think it's better than 50% of the officers involved in a shooting will quit law enforcement within 5 years of that shooting. And so they take it very seriously, and it weighs on them. It's a very difficult situation for civilian law enforcement to actually shoot and have to kill somebody or shoot and seriously injure somebody. And, you know, it's not like TV, obviously, as you guys know. I mean, there's nothing like that. And officers, it's a rare event in an officer's career. Many people go through their entire career never firing their weapon. And so, what other questions, Michael?
Guy named Thomas who was doing some speaking, and I sort of agreed with him. What are the boundaries around open carry? I was sitting in a park and a guy was packing a pistol, and he came up and started talking to me about his political views. And I didn't know he was a mental health guy or a passionate political, but you know, when an officer walks into like the rally, it was at the Lively Park, where, you know, there's like 6 guys with M16s or AK-47s. Does that make the officer nervous?
Oh yeah, you know, this is a kind of a different phenomenon that I've never seen here in my career. I've seen more of people open carrying in the last 2 years than you ever saw in the 80s, 90s, or anything like that. I mean, this is really kind of unique. And so it does make officers very nervous. It is, you know, by law, can they do it? Yes. I would expect an officer has got his antennas as high up as he can get when you're talking to individuals like that. You don't know who's who and why they decided to do the open carry. It is legal to open carry. You cannot, if a store, and I'm just going to throw this out there because we get this question sometimes. If I'm open carrying and I'm walking down the street, not me as a police officer, I'm just a citizen, and I'm walking down the street and I go into a store has the right to ask you to leave with that weapon. Right. It may be a public store, but it's a privately owned store. But in a park or a government-owned situation, that's not the same thing. And so that's kind of where it comes from. It does create a different dynamic in life. I mean, there's a lot of this going on, and there's been a lot of it lately. So our officers are very aware of it. We used to get we've had a couple of calls in the last couple of years regarding these individuals who want to kind of see what they want to videotape officers coming across someone who's armed with a weapon. And then they kind of act, they don't really cooperate with the officer. And they want to see if the officer will do something to basically, you know, interfere with their right to carry. And then you'll see the stuff posted on YouTube. And I wish I could think of the name where you could find them. You can go on YouTube and find these cases where Second Amendment rights are supposedly violated by the police officer. So we've experienced that with here in Springfield, where people try to challenge us. So we are aware of, we have provided training with our officers on how to respond to that. And when they come across someone with open carry, they're really paying attention to it. And if they were going to make an arrest, or you were coming up and somebody who was open carrying, and I was going to arrest them, obviously we would be, you know, the gun would probably be out most likely, and we would make sure that we took their weapon away from them before we went any further. So it's different. I'm not going to deny that at all. You know, I just want people to be safe, and some people don't pay any attention to it. And other people are very concerned and nervous about it. So we'll get calls for service, and I'm not talking about just the political aspect here. I'm just talking about sometimes you have somebody just walking down the street and they're packing their gun, or they've got their gun on their hip, and some people get nervous and they call the police. And we can't simply just not, you know, if we just sit there and walk away from it, and then that individual goes on some kind of shooting spree, we're going to get blamed for that. So we usually at least go out there and try to talk to them, like, hey, what are you doing? What's going on?
What about carrying machetes and knives? I've gone by the river and just seen lots of crazy behavior that.
Yeah, I guess as long as you're not you know, you have a prior felony, then I guess you can do that. I mean, you know, it's different. I'm telling you. I wish I had an answer for you, but I don't.
Okay. So everyone's back.
It's like the Wild West, I guess. And, you know, so. Other questions about use of force?
Now, let's have further discussion moving forward about how we can present some of this to the community. I think that'd be really helpful.
Well, next time we meet, we'll come with some suggestions and see what you think.
Okay.
That work? Okay.
I
got 3 minutes, so I'll give you just a little quick recap on our hiring process. We we've had a couple hiring processes. We're going to pick up, I think, about 5 or 6 new officers as long as they get through the rest of their background steps. But we'll still have openings after that. So there will be another process being put out there here probably within the next couple of weeks. So if you know good applicants who want to apply for a police officer job, this will be coming soon. So please share that with everybody you know. And then next Monday night for council, I think the council is starting to interview potential members for this committee for the minority cultural position. And so we have 2 applicants for that. So if you want to sign in and watch, you'll be able to see that at the work session. And I think that's all I've got.
That's it.
Thank you. And if you guys think of questions that you know after you get done here, or you wonder, you're welcome to email Jessica, and she will get them to me, and I'll get you an answer.
Fantastic. Great.
Yes.
What about arranging that work session I brought up? Can we come up with a date, or
do you want to try to do that the next meeting?
a month from now?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean make the next meeting a work session?
Good. Or do you want to do it separate?
We just make it a little longer, maybe.
I didn't catch that.
Just maybe make it a longer meeting.
I would recommend a special meeting that's a work session where we just put an agenda with, you know, all our questions or whatever, and then just a regular meeting.
Well, let's do this. If I could suggest this, and Councilor Pishner, you can say yay or nay. Let me give us a chance to talk to Mary Bridget, who's the city attorney. So make sure they have time to prepare, and then the city manager's office. And then once we kind of get a timeline, then we'll just email you and figure out when that's going to be. Does that work?
Oh yeah, that works great.
Absolutely.
Now next month is December. We traditionally, I don't think, have met in December. So, but this is COVID era, so there is no traditional anything. So,
and I'll leave that up to the committee.
Yeah, so I'm up for it.
How do we want to do this? We want to take a yay and nay vote?
What? We can do that at the work session.
Yeah. Okay, Michael. I don't know if we're going to get that to happen that fast, although I'd be game. Let's just kind of take a roll call at this point. All in favor of meeting in December?
Aye.
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 What's
Chief?
another meeting?
Chief, I don't hear an aye from you.
I do at least 4 of these Zoom meetings every day of my life. I've got Zoom tea. I would love to.
What if I agreed to bring chocolate?
Yeah, we used to get pizza, Jessica.
You're not going to get any pity from me, Michael.
I don't even see Jessica anymore.
Not going to get any pity from me.
Okay, so I think we have a majority that would like to meet. True?
All right.
Well, that agree to meet, not necessarily like to meet, right?
Oh, Joe. Where's that holiday spirit?
There is one, just want to say, there is just, I didn't know if you wanted to, there is, if anybody has that item 7.
Yeah.
I didn't want to, you know, it doesn't have to be around Robin, but just in case anybody had 7A, if anybody wanted to do member information share, I know that, just to throw that out there.
So, and actually,
I didn't think we got to that yet, Jess. Okay.
And Chief, what you're asking earlier in regards to a work session and running it by city manager's office, and we should run that also through council leadership, so that way, again, everybody knows what everybody's doing and what the objectives are, and possibly an opportunity for council leadership to provide some input to see for outcomes that they would like to see out of that work session as well.
Will do. Yep.
Well, go ahead.
I just want to say that you've been under quite a microscope the last couple of months, and you've been walking through it very well. So I just want to acknowledge that, because you have a tough job right now.
You're talking to me?
I'm talking to Chief Lewis there. Right?
Great. Thanks a lot, Michael. But yes, he's doing an amazing job.
Joe, you're the mayor now, so enjoy it.
That's why I get paid the high bucks.
Yeah.
Yes, and actually, you know, I'll tell you right now, as a counselor and interim or whatever you want to call me, he's been doing an amazing job. He's under a lot of pressure, and he really wants to get through the other end of this, just like as much as everybody else here. And we're all going to come out better. We just need to understand that we all need to work through it and not give up. And that's what we do here in Springfield. So I have no problem supporting that.
That's great. You're already mayor, Joseph. I've got one more question.
Wow.
Where are we hired someone to do the investigation, and there's a 6-month timeline or something on that?
You're talking asking Chief or me?
The city manager, I guess I should. We hired somebody to investigate this Thurston incident.
Mr. Brazil?
Yeah.
Yes, and his contract ends at the first of the year, right around the first of the year, and he should have it all wrapped up by then.
So you're going to talk to us? That's my question.
Oh, well, it'll definitely. I have no doubt that there's going to be many parts of that that are going to be part of the public process and part of the council review. Absolutely.
Okay.
Did I speak out of turn on that, Chief?
No, right on the money.
Okay.
So do members, any individual member have anything else they like to bring up or discuss at this time?
I just want to share that, and I know that one person spoke to this, that they weren't necessarily asking for community dialogue. I do know that there were a number of folks that were interested in. I did get a call from Neil, who is the assistant city manager, and they're wanting to pick that up. And I was more than happy to have them run with that. And so I just wanted you to know that we weren't even completely sure if it should have come from this committee anyways. And so that's why, again, I'm open for a real clarification of understanding of our roles. But I'm just glad for Neil to pick that up, and I trust that that'll get handled and done well. So just wanted to be clear since I was asked to run with that a bit. Okay. Questions about that?
Thank you, Barry. Yeah, that's going to move forward, I think.
Eric, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, Michael had just mentioned briefly the rally that took place Sunday at Lively Park, and I just wanted to just mention we really appreciated having police department's involvement, support during the event, and opportunity to run through with them our plan for making sure that took place as safely and peaceably as possible. And we were really pleased with the overall conduct of everyone involved at the event. It was peaceful, it was orderly. Afterward, we got a lot of feedback from the public about some concerns regarding potential voter intimidation, given the ballot box that was there at Lively Park. But we did put safeguards in place that we thought were going to be able to address that situation, and turns out we still had some concerns raised anyway. Michael Wario, our superintendent's on the call tonight, and he can speak to other precautions or any questions that you might have about it. But again, just wanted to reiterate how much we appreciated having the department's support.
And if I could just echo that, just really want to thank Chief Lewis and Lieutenant Rapay. Hopefully that's how you pronounce his last name. But as Michael Bean had mentioned before about, firearms, we're a park and rec district, and we're really not used to that at that level. But just to have the support of the police in case we did have a situation or concerns, to have the trained professionals do it. But it was a rental of a Trump rally, and certainly I'm proud of the way that my staff had handled it. But just to have that cooperation of the Springfield Police Department really assisted with keeping that as peaceful as possible. And also when they lined up for the parade, they emptied about 300 cars in about 20 minutes. So the rally was supposed to last until 3 o'clock, and that parking lot was clear at 2:55. So again, I know I really appreciate that support, and and just wanted to jump on in case anyone else had questions about that.
Michael, I was impressed that the superintendent on a Sunday, was it a Sunday, was out there the whole time. That's very impressive for the top guy to stand there and watch it. So,
well, I try to be at a bunch of different events, but you also know that those that may require a little bit more attention. And I certainly was glad that I was there, because you had a lot of Monday morning after the fact complaints that after an investigation that was held about all this voter intimidation, and I was within bird's eye view of that ballot box for about 90% of the time. I didn't see it. Over 100 people dropped a vote in there. So again, sometimes you kind of think it's plus my Philadelphia Eagles weren't playing until later on that evening.
it was very impressive, and it's very impressive when people are carrying firearms. So.
There was also a slightly comical, there was a horse, a young lady on a horse started walking up towards Splash. So I think it was the first time we ever had to ask a horse to leave our wave park.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to Willamette Lane, Michael, and your staff there for being out there and watching that box and being able to be that witness about whether there's interference or not. That made a big deal. I got calls from a lot of different places around the country and anything about that. And so it was perfect that you guys were out there. And we all want people to be able to access their right to vote. That was handled very well by your team.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky to have the team that I have.
It's always nice to be able to give kudos, and kudos to you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do any other members have any other topics? We're running 1939, so it's 7:40. We have time, of course, for anything else that anybody would like to bring up. So let's decide that now, and if there's not, we will adjourn the meeting. Going once. Going twice. Okay.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thanks so much for attending, and we are meeting next month. You'll look for your for that invite from Jessica in your inbox.
I'm going to watch Terry's fan as we fade out.
I know, Terry. Good night.
Good night.
Night.